Welcome all. We're here for the City Council Public Safety Subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, September 30th, 2014. Mr. Clerk, you call the roll, please.
Chairman Lowell.
Here.
Council Blanchard.
Here.
Council Mercia.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Tonight, two items on the agenda. The first is a review of the matrix study regarding Lowell Police Department recommendations, policies, procedures. I understand the Chief will give a very brief update on that, as there is a full presentation due soon to the City Council, but then also talk about, in general, issues with the Police Department. Secondly, we have the Lowell Fire Department staffing on the agenda, and we'll get to that. We have Chief Pitter and Lieutenant Keene here as well. Joining us tonight, Councilor Samaras and Councilor Milonazzo, as well as our City Manager, Kevin Murphy. Chief, I'll let you take it.
Thank you very much, Councilor. We intend to do a more comprehensive review of the matrix management study, and I believe it's going to be conducted in the November subcommittee meeting. But at this point, I thought it would be appropriate to bring before the committee what we've done so far in terms of specifically the policy and procedures. Without question, one of the most important aspects of reforming the police department and the reorganization that we conducted in the spring of last year and continues on today was a determination that the policy and the procedures within the police department were outdated and that they needed to be significantly updated in line with the current best practices in the state and police procedure in general. And then more importantly, or equally as important, I should say, is the manner in which they're disseminated to every member of the organization. So let me just talk briefly about the matrix study. That was a study that was completed in 2008, delivered to the city, I believe, in 2009. And it was a management study at that particular time. So to a great extent, the study is dated. It's approximately 5 to 6 years old, depending on which time frame you use. There are some portions of the study that I disagree with, and some of them that are dead on, and obviously that was needed to be completed. The most important was the policy and procedures. I think that is the one that's the first mention in the management study. Retired Superintendent Ken LaValle contracted with a vendor, which was Northeast Police Accreditation, to revise all the policy and procedures of the police department to make sure that they were in compliance with accreditation standards. And that was completed. That was delivered to the police department, I believe, approximately a year or a year and a half ago. What I did when I took over was I took a command level officer, Captain Tom Kennedy, who was also an attorney. I assigned him to work full-time on these policy and procedures to make sure that they were in line with the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police model policies that they disseminate to all police organizations in the state, and to also make sure that these policies were in line with our own business practices in the Lowell Police Department. Once that was completed by Captain Kennedy, actually it's an ongoing process, we formed a policy review committee made up of senior members of the organization to review these policies. We meet once a week, and we go through the policies as they're delivered to us by Captain Kennedy. We make final edits, recommendations. Sometimes we send the policies out for additional research if that's necessary. And to this date, we've completed 50 of them. Of these policy and procedures have been completed. 20 of them are going to be displayed for you into this software that we purchased. 30 of them are in the final drafting, so they're literally just being edited by the clerical personnel before they're put on this. But approximately half of them have been completed, and we anticipate the other half will be completed and rolled out in short order, hopefully by the first of the year. One of the things we did realize with respect to the policy and procedures is the manner in which they're disseminated within the organization. There was kind of a system that was not really accountable. They were either distributed by email. Most recently, in prior administrations, they did it the old hard copy way, and it certainly didn't seem to be an efficient, modern, up-to-date system. We did some research. We came up with this software that Deputy Superintendent Friedel is going to demonstrate to you. This is a state-of-the-art cloud and web-based system. that we can, it's very secure, it's encrypted, but once the policies are put into this software, an employee can log on anywhere in the organization, anywhere in the building, off-site. They can do it at home, they can do it in the cruises, and they can review the policies, and it's all documented in terms of, the deputy will explain to you how we know each individual when they've signed off on it. It's also keyword searchable, so for example, if a young officer at 3 o'clock in the morning wants to know the way that we want them to handle a particular situation, they can pull this up in their cruiser, keyword search, whatever it might be, and find, get the best practices that they're supposed to follow. So with that having been said, I'll let Deputy Superintendent Friedel give you a brief demonstration just to show you some of the highlights of this system, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit, very briefly, about accreditation in general.
Great, thank you, and my apologies, Deputy, also joining us tonight, Deputy Friedel. Thank you.
Thank you. As the superintendent said, this was no small undertaking to do all of the policies and procedures for the police department. We have approximately 104 policies that were delivered to us from the vendor. These are completely updated policies. In some cases, they are brand-new policies. They fill a void. There might be a current modern issue that we hadn't had a specific policy on before. So a total of 104 policies that we're in process of reviewing and rolling out. So with that in mind, it became extremely important to have some type of system to effectively disseminate that to all of our employees, and these go not just to the sworn but to the civilian staff as well. Then we also needed a means to track when they received it, when they reviewed it, what policy was in effect on a particular date, and so forth. So we became aware of this particular, this vendor, this product called Compliance Bridge, and we, after seeing a demonstration of the product, felt that this was the answer at this time for what we needed to keep this project moving forward. So it's going to serve as a repository or a library, if you will, of all of our policies. So at the present time, I've been able to log on here remotely. As the superintendent said, you can log on from any device that has access to the internet. I have the exact same screen that you're looking at right now on my cell phone. So even from a smartphone, I can pull up, I know you really can't see it, but there's a smaller version of what you're seeing on the screen right now. So if I was out somewhere, if I was here attending a meeting and you had a question about a particular policy, I could literally pull it up on my phone and answer your question or read to you what it says. So all of those features were very attractive. Again, they can pull it up in the police cars that are equipped with computers. This is actually my screen as an employee. So what you're seeing here is, I'll scroll down. These are all the policies that have been distributed since June of this year. We started using this, June 4th, 2014. We started rolling out these policies. So it shows the title of the policy. It shows, this is the version. So it's tracking, 1.0 is the version. It shows the date that it was rolled out, and it shows over here the date that I accepted it. So each employee has to open this up, read it, review it. If they have any questions, speak to a supervisor for clarification or ask their questions up the chain of command. And then they acknowledge receipt of the policy. Hold on. And then it tracks the acknowledgement here, when they acknowledged receiving the policy. You can see here these green circles. If you notice, that means that I've acknowledged all those documents. If it was yellow, it means that I opened the document, but I had not yet acknowledged it, because we allow people, obviously, time to review the policy. And in general, we give everyone 2 weeks from the time of dissemination until the due date of when they're supposed to acknowledge it. And there's a little bit more room than that, but we try to follow up then to see what the concern might be, why they haven't yet acknowledged the policy. And if it was red, that means I hadn't yet even opened the document yet to begin my review of the policy. So it's an easy means to readily look at what's still, so for me logging on, if I had a red circle, I know that I need to immediately address that policy, that's a new policy, and I need to review that. A number of us at the command level have the ability to go in and run reports to see what the status is, to see what kind of progress we're making and who might be in arrears or any questions that might be asked. For example, as part of some type of inquiry or investigation, we may need to know when someone might have acknowledged receipt of a policy. We can go in and look that information up. So and this is what I see, and I'll just show you a quick, just a quick screenshot so you can see what it is that we can run. Just give it a minute here. So let's see, and I'll pull this one up. Oh, sorry, I did that earlier. I tried to practice. All right, so I can open this up. And here is an alphabetized list of all department employees, and it shows me the exact date and time that they acknowledged receipt of this email. This will, again, will track, we'll have this information forever. Even as technology changes, we'll be able to store this information and save it for the future if there's ever any questions relative to, again, what policy was in effect, what version was in effect at that time. Could be 5 or 6 years down the road. We're asked as part of a public records request or discovery in some type of a lawsuit or something. It happens, and we have to research all of this. And so this is why it was so imperative that we have this. Actually, until we found this product, it actually delayed our ability to disseminate the policies. We were ready to go, but we needed a system that was going to be useful to us, and we think we found that. And we also think that this particular product might be useful even to other city departments in some capacity to store records. So far, we've been very pleased with it. It's very user-friendly, both from the administrative side in terms of loading reports. We handle all the management of this. We created the database of employees. They're broken down into user groups, departments, if you will, inside the organization. And so both administratively and on the end user side, the employee, it's very simple to open these, to look for them, to search, as the superintendent said, keyword searchable, to find something that they're looking for. So we think we should be able to move this project along pretty rapidly now.
Couple of points, Councilor, with respect to this. We can incorporate a test into a particular policy. So a lot of the policies may not require that, but let's say there's a more significant policy, one of the red ones we call high liability. We can incorporate a quick test into it. We can also incorporate as part of this a video, a PowerPoint, a demonstration, a picture, whatever we decide. So I think it's definitely the way to go for the organization. So.
Great, thank you. Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the chief and the deputy. Did you update the policy on prisoners being held in a holding cell?
That's, Councilor, we had a very extensive, in-depth discussion about that this week. So that one is in the queue. That has been completed just for final editing from a clerical perspective, and I anticipate that will be disseminated within a week or so.
And how long do you have in between time to check a prisoner in a cell? Because it was like so long, and then we wanted it narrowed down to, I don't know, every 15 minutes.
Right. Well, it's 30 minutes.
It's 30 minutes.
30 minutes at a minimum. If the person requires special attention, if they've exhibited suicidal tendencies to harm themselves, or if they've been previously indicated through the statewide database that they were suicidal, or any other magnitude of potential hazards, then that goes to 15 minutes. And so it's a minimum of 30, and it can be much more than that depending on the criteria. And that's all incorporated in the new policy.
Do you have a screen whereby it focuses on the cells?
Yes.
Do you have that?
Yes.
And I'm sure there's probably not someone sitting there at all times. That there is.
Well, we have the video monitoring system is in the detention attendant's office. It's also displayed in both the captain's office upstairs and the lieutenant's office, which would be, one of them would be the officer in charge of the station. I can also view it now in my office and the deputy's office. So, and in addition to those video monitoring systems, they are required physically to go through the cell block at a minimum of every 30 minutes, and that increases depending on the level of hazard or threat by the individual.
And you have a procedure in place whereby, as you're not completed, you're like a half completed, the police officers signing in that they have received that
The policy?
The policy?
Yes, that's part of this.
So would you
That's one of
say-
the attractive features of this.
So how many, are we all set with the police having all signed back, or do we still have some that didn't?
You'll see, if I may, right up here, rules and regulations, we have 95% of the department that has acknowledged it. We have a small percentage that have either been out injured or some sort of significant leave. Those are the people that we're still, so they'll always, we're shooting for 100%, but
Right,
if
I
someone's been out.
understand.
Yep.
Because I don't want anybody to fall through the cracks.
Nope, that's
No,
what
Okay,
we-
that's
as I
fine.
showed you the reports, it makes it very clear. And one of the reports that we get is, each week, it's an automatically generated report of it's called non-compliance.
Right.
So we get each week a list of any employee that has not yet acknowledged.
There you go.
And it's easy to follow up that way. Yep.
That's good, thank
It's
you.
another key feature.
So this is really good. I think it's the way to go, and I've actually suggested it to the law department that the other city departments may be interested in jumping on this and see if it's something could be usable in other city departments. If you want, Council, I can talk very briefly about accreditation in general, if you want me to. Sure.
Please, yes.
What I can tell you is about the accreditation. There's two forms of accreditation. The national accreditation, which is the clear standard, is probably not something that's going to be realistic for the Lowell Police Department in this time, most notably because of the limitation of the physical plant or the building that we have over there. And so, and other considerations specific to Massachusetts. So most police departments in the state of Massachusetts that strive for some level of accreditation shoot for the Massachusetts accreditation standard. And that's called the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission, I believe it's called. That is obtainable, and that is something I intend to shoot for. I think it's a goal that's worthy to go in that direction for the police department. That's the intent of this. It starts with the policy and procedures. You really can't progress to the next level until all your policy and procedures are in compliance with the accreditation standards. That's the lion's share of the work. And so once we get that done, I hope to get it done by the first of the year. Once we get that done, or shortly thereafter, we'll go to the next level with the accreditation process. And so right now, I believe it's 82 police agencies in Massachusetts are not accredited with the Mass system. They've enrolled in the process. So I want to be the 82nd right after we get this done and start the process for accreditation.
Are we enrolled currently?
I think we are currently enrolled, but I think because of the not having the policy and procedures completed, we're probably significantly down. I want to move that up and get us in the forefront.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Councilor Belanger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to the new policies and procedures, Chief.
Yes.
Nice presentation, by the way, from the both of you.
appreciate
Well
that.
done. And it's great. It's refreshing to see the technology from the phones to the cruisers, but as you know, in the heat of battle,
Right.
they may not have the time or the luxury of going in the cruiser to la-da-da, let's see what's the proper channels here. How are we assured that each man and woman on the street know these policies and procedures inside and out? They basically, when they confirm back to you, are they basically signing off saying, we know them, we understand them, kind of thing? Is there a test of some sort? How are we assured that they're familiar with these new policies?
Right. Well, it depends on the complexity of the policy. There's many of the policies just almost notifications, and then obviously some of them much more significant in terms of the day-to-day operations of the organization. For example, the use of force policy that was put out probably 4 weeks ago, we made sure, we prioritized that one and made sure that that one was at the top of the list because we came into the annual firearms qualification in the fall. So that is deeply incorporated into the firearms qualification that we do twice a year, and there's a training component to that firearms qualification. So the use of force policy is gone over in detail by our firearms and use of force instructors as part of the qualification. So we made sure that that policy was out, disseminated, and it was available on the system before the officers went to training in the field to be instructed on the policy and the use of force. So that's an indication of how we address it.
Okay. But again, you're assured they each have read these, they confirm, and in
Right.
turn get back to you, we know them, we understand them, so.
Right, and if an individual officer has a concern with it, and he doesn't think he's been appropriately, he's not appropriately trained on it, then it goes up through the chain of command to his immediate supervisor and to his division commander. And the intent is that the supervisors should be training the officers on the policy. So,
Okay.
and then they can bring any concerns up through the chain of command.
Okay, that sounds sufficient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Marcia?
Thank you. I'm just a little bit curious about what I see on each side, because I can't see anything there. And I don't want to ask you if I could have a copy of every policy as it is, but I would like a copy of what policy I could be interested in. Do you see the list there?
We can get you the index.
Right, the index is fine with me. I'd like to just see what type of policy you're dealing with here. I'd
Sure.
just like to
We'll
know.
get you, we can provide it for all
That's
three
all
members.
I want to know.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Moving on, Chief, I know since the last time we had a Public Safety Subcommittee meeting, there were some changes with the police department and so forth. Could you just take a minute to go over any substantial changes since the last time we met?
Well, I think the most significant issue we're dealing with, Counselor, is obviously the gun-related violence. It's frustrating from a police perspective. At the same time, the crime rate in general is down across the city. We do see an increase in gun-related violence. And also, we've seen an increase in the seizures of illegal firearms in the city by Lowell police officers. So the Lowell police, the men and women out there day and night are doing their job. They're out there seizing these firearms, interacting with some dangerous people in the street. What we've done to specifically address that issue is we've dedicated some of our resources, which is personnel, to be high-impact teams in the nighttime hours, to go out into the areas that we've determined through analysis that are more prone to some of these violent acts. And they're conducting very aggressive and very proactive motor vehicle stops, also encountering some disorder on the street, people that may be walking. And the intent is to prevent this if we can, as much as we reasonably can. I think one component of that, hopefully, we've been trying to put out some press releases as the officers are doing very good work and making appropriate arrests and seizures. You'll note over the weekend, for example, just one example, our gang unit was able to make an apprehension and recover a firearm, a handgun, off the street. I believe it was on Friday night. So that's just one minor example of how we're approaching this.
And also, I know I've seen in the police department pushing the see something, say something.
That's right,
aspect.
right. And one of the other things that we've done, and I think hopefully it's been disseminated out to the media, we've incorporated a lot of street corner meetings in the neighborhoods. I know several have been conducted this week. And the feedback that I'm getting is very positive from the community in terms of we're going out, literally trying to go out door to door and invite the residents in these localized little street corners to come to the meetings and talk to us and hear the presentation. With the idea that if we can open the lines of communication between the residents and the police officers, then when something does happen, they'll call us and they'll let us know. There's a multitude of different ways people can get us. Get a hold of us, the regular 911 line, which is the preferred method, obviously the way to do it for an emergency. There's our regular business line, which is 978-937-3200. There's Crime Stoppers hotline. There's Text-to-Tip, which is really a very good method. If you have a smartphone, you can download the MyPD app, which is and then go to the Lowell Police portion of it. That's a great way to give us pictures, tips, anonymous. So the hope is that by outreaching to the community and doing these meetings, that when people need us or they have information, those communication, the trust will have been built up in advance, and they'll get us the information that will help keep their neighborhoods safe.
Great, thank you. At this time, anybody want to say something?
My name is Anne Marie Page. I reside at 26 Fremont Street in Lowell, and I am the current president of the Citywide Neighborhood Council. We want to thank you very much for inviting us to come to sit in on your meeting, and we realize that what you've said, procedure, manuals, are important. They're very important. And it's very important that everyone reads it and documents the fact that they read it, so you can't say, oh, I didn't know anything about it. But what we really want to hear is what you're saying. As they say, boots on the ground. We want to see you, we want to hear you, we want to know you're out there, and we want the bad guys to know you're out there too. It's getting a little carried away here, and we do know that there is a gun law on the books. If you get picked up with a gun and you do not have a license to carry, at one time it was mandatory 1 year in prison. Someone has found a loophole in that, and it's not working, and we need to sew up the loophole. Because if you get picked up with a gun in Lowell and you don't have a license to carry, you should be put away for 364 days. And on the 365th day, we'll sit down and talk to you. Because it's something, there's a glitch someplace because they're not afraid. They need to be afraid to know, well, if I'm going to carry a gun, I'm not going to Lowell. I'll find another place. I'll relocate. But that's the message we want to get out. We have seen more officers, but we want boots on the ground. We want to see them. And we want the bad guys to see you. We do appreciate what you do, and we know you put your life on the line. We'd like to see them get a little tougher over the courts, but we'll work on that. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. Council Samaras?
Thank you. Chief, thank you for the report. Last night, the city manager had a meeting with the Downtown Business Association, and many people that spoke did praise what they felt was going on with the police department, that they were very active in responding in a very quick manner to various issues. And it's not going to be easy. I mean, you just went over the rules policy. That's something that has to be done. But there's still a lot of discussion about the panhandlers and people on the street who are just really becoming such a nuisance to some of the business owners that it's affecting their business. We know that they have rights, but the thing is, there are certain people, as someone described to me one time, there are sometimes people who do bad things, but they should be helped. There are sometimes some bad people. In some of the cases, we've heard of some atrocious situations where not only bad language, but threatening language or fights have been used by some. Is there any more that can be done? I mean, what's been happening? I've also thought of, in some cases, if possible, putting police officers, detectives not in uniform to, just walk the streets to see what they can see, because, they wouldn't be identified quickly as a policeman. And it's just, what is happening, do you think, to help the downtown business people to take away their fears about what's been happening? This is something that happens everywhere in every city, but some cities are more successful than others in dealing with it. So what's on the plate?
Well, I think some of the things we discussed last evening were a potential to use a video surveillance system downtown. I think that would be very much a deterrent to not only crime, but just disorder in the downtown area, and I'd like to advocate for that. And I think we're in discussions potentially looking at some funding mechanisms to incorporate that with a spot charter program. So that's one thing that I think would be a valuable resource for the police department in the city. The other thing is, too, I think ultimately when we get a panhandling ordinance that will survive a constitutional challenge, I think that's going to be beneficial. We have to have an ordinance that's going to allow a police officer ultimately to make an arrest if the person refuses to identify themselves or refuses to stop the behavior. There has to be a credible arrest action if it's necessary at the end of the road. Right, and that's the problem. And it has to be credible, and it has to protect the city, and it has to protect the officer from ultimately, which could be a significant liability. Once we get that, and I think we're close, I've talked to the city solicitor, and I've talked to other police departments, most notably Worcester Police Department, which has one I think ours is going to be fashioned off of. Once we have that, I think that'll be a great asset to us too. And I think that hopefully will be coming relatively soon. The other thing is, we should not, as a community or as a police department, tolerate disorderly conduct in the downtown or anywhere. And so if we brought to our attention that people are being disruptive, being unruly, to the point where they're causing concern for the other people in the community down there that are trying to go peaceably about their business and conduct their activities, then, we'll send police officers down there and we'll address that. And if it requires an arrest for a disturbance of the peace, then that's ultimately what we're there for. So I would encourage everybody to call us when they see activity that they determine is not consistent with our standards, and we'll take appropriate action. Doesn't mean we always have to arrest them, but if they're given a warning and they don't want to conduct themselves appropriately, then ultimately it's the police department's responsibility to address that.
And as Mrs. Page has stated, the
Right,
presence of
exactly.
police just in the area is a natural deterrent.
That's exactly right.
Thank you. Counselor?
No, thank you.
Right. Counselor Mercia?
I just want to know, how many canine dogs do we have in the police department?
Right now, we have one, and we're looking to add another one. We had two, and unfortunately, one passed away.
Yes.
The canine did, so we're
He
looking to
was
add
not
a
replaced
second one.
yet.
Well, that's going to be an extensive process.
It is.
That's not something that you can just go out and buy one. It's many months before you can get one, have them pair with a partner and do the appropriate training. But we are looking to get a second one, that's right.
Well, I just want to briefly state that there's a lot of burglaries in neighborhoods, and I firmly believe that someone in neighborhoods are watching the neighborhoods because they live in the immediate area. That's my belief. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm not a detective. But when a man is taken out in an ambulance and the wife gets in the car and goes to the hospital, when you get in the hospital, you're there for hours. So I'm certainly sure that it wasn't a guy from across the city that just happened to be in the neighborhood. I firmly believe it was a neighborhood person. So much so that when the wife come home, she was robbed. And she called the husband at the hospital. He couldn't leave. He was admitted for 4 days. I firmly believe if there was a dog there, he could have sniffed out the area. I don't know any police officer that has the ability, like a canine dog, to do that. So when the husband come home 4 days later, he suspected someone in the neighborhood, went over to the property as it was trash day and went through the trash and found his picture ID, his checkbook, and there's not a thing that took place here. And he got reprimanded for, I'm very frustrated with this situation. I think a dog would have found something.
Well, even if we don't have a dog on duty, for example, when Councilor Caulfield's residence was burglarized.
And I'm not talking about...
No, I understand that, but just for example, we did bring a K-9 in from Billerica PD. Very much those kind of assets, those K-9 assets, we all share, all the communities and the state police. So when we have one and Westford needs it, we send it to Westford and they reciprocate. So we really can get a K-9 usually within 20, 30 minutes, anytime we need it, from one of the other communities or the state police.
How often can you get a detective over there? Because they said they'd come back in the morning, and nobody came until the lady called, and the detective said we knew nothing about it.
We'll check on that, Counselor. I think I understand from the deputy that that's being followed up on, the situation you highlighted.
Yeah, I'm aware of the matter that you're discussing. I actually thought they did have a dog come out that night, but nonetheless, we do have, typically have canines available to us from other, in fact, we had a gentleman that works, I believe for I forget if it's the DOC, Department of Corrections, and he lives in Lowell, and he's a canine handler, and he's offered his services to us, and provided his personal contact information should we be in need. He was also available. So we do tend to reach out for those resources. I am familiar with, there is detective action on that case, and I am familiar with what you've discussed regarding the person in the
Because if
neighborhood.
someone in the neighborhood thinks they got away with that, they'll be in my house next, or they'll be in my neighbor's house, and I want to stop it right away.
I understand.
And I'm sure every neighborhood group here feels the same way as I'm saying it. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Counselor. Anything else? Chief Deputy, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next item, item B on the agenda is Lowell Fire Department staffing. Chief Pitter is here, Lieutenant Keen from Lowell Fire Department is here. We did receive some statistics concerning staffing over the past 5.5 fiscal years. Chief, if you could just go over it briefly and basically just tell us what it means, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, I prepared this chart to give a picture of company closings over the last 5 fiscal years. And as you can see from the chart, we are moving in the right direction from a high in fiscal 10 of 1.72 companies closed per shift to under 1 in fiscal 14 and so far this year. The last column, I included the overtime that we've spent in each of the fiscal years because it's a direct correlation how much we're spending on overtime to how many companies are closed. The only 2 ways we're going to keep company closings moving in the right direction is a continued committal of overtime funds or to increase the staffing of the fire department. And as can be seen, as the overtime has increased each year, company closings have gone down. In the center of the chart, I've included the command cars because that's an important feature as well, and their closings are not reflected in the company closings. And as you can see in each of the fiscal years, the number of closings, and our ideal coverage is 2 deputy chiefs on every shift. One runs out of Gorham Street covering the south side, and another out of the Civic Center here covering the north side. But you can see in the percent column that anywhere from 25% to almost 30% of the time, we're not running at that full capacity. That means we only have 1 deputy chief on at that time. So those overtime funds, they're used to keep the command cars open as well as the fire companies. Ideally, I would like to see no companies closed. We have 13 fire companies. It's my belief they should all be open on every shift, whatever that takes, if it's overtime money or increased staffing. The good news in the notes at the bottom is you can see that there was a time when we were closing 3 companies per shift. That has not happened since February of 2011. And we've only closed, the last time we closed 2 companies in the same shift was last November, the middle of last November. So, again, we're moving in the right direction. This summer schedule, July and August, is actually the first summer schedule that I can remember where we've only closed 1 company per shift, which is great. However, you can see also, though, that it necessitated a rather rapid expenditure of the overtime funds. We're about a quarter way through the year, and we've spent half the funds that were allocated. So I think you can see from the chart, again, we're moving in the right direction. And like I wanted to point out that it's directly related to funding of that overtime account. I think the other thing we could look at is to supplement the department. We've been at 201 members for years. I mean, if that were to go up, another 8 firefighters, another dozen, those would be used, spread out over all 4 groups, and would certainly impact the company closings.
Thank you. So, with the being a summer season, does the number, the 389 seems awfully high for just a quarter of the fiscal year. Does it always tend to run that way early on?
Well, everybody has scheduled their 2 weeks vacation in July and August. You get the warm weather. So that's our biggest hit for overtime is July through August. Usually after Labor Day, we see it taper off, and we get into the winter months. It should slow down. But again, we'll be at least equal to fiscal 14, I would imagine.
So to assume that it'd be $1.6 million is just, that's not going to happen because everything's happening now in June, July, and August?
Well, I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but if we're going to continue to only close 1 company, I mean, I can't predict. I don't think it would extrapolate out to 4 times what we're looking at, but I think it's going to be high.
Under what procedure does it be decided what company closes or which of the 13 in the city does close?
It can be any number of reasons. It can be who's coming in on a particular company, where the offices are, who's capable of driving the apparatus. And then the deputies will always look to, well, we're only closing one, so it doesn't really enter into it. I was going to say when we were closing two, they wouldn't close two in the same district. But, so right now, it's really just who's showing up, who's capable of operating the trucks.
So any particular day, not going in, like, for example, the downtown, the Civic said, that would never close.
Right. We don't usually, well, we never close Engine 6 on West 6th Street or Engine 10 on Old Ferry Road. Those stay open all the time. We don't like to close the rescue company because of its unique capabilities. Oftentimes, excuse me, the deputies will look to close a ladder company first, but sometimes it is an engine company. So there's no real rhyme or reason. It's not a set rotating schedule. It's really dependent on that shift, the circumstances for that shift.
All right, thank you. Lieutenant Keene, any opinions on this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I do get started, after being sworn in, the city manager has had a number of public safety incidents, which is evident by my brothers and sisters across the hall in the police department, along with our own issues with the fire department, the overdoses, the number of things that are going on. And it very well could have been looked at as overwhelming. I believe Manager Murphy, along with the city council, hasn't done that. They've actually taken a proactive stance on all of these issues, and I'd be negligent if I didn't mention that. It's very important to mention that we know that the city, as a citizen of Lowell, actually, I live in the city of Lowell, I've raised my family here, they're all still here. They are important to the city council, they are important to the city manager, as are the members of the Lowell Fire Department. I mean, the public safety officers of the city that you've hired to protect you, it's not lost on us that we're down to closing one company. And that's why we're here now, to try and keep those companies open. And it is important, because when we do look at these numbers, numbers can be somewhat deceiving. When we were talking about closing multiple companies before, that meant that when we were closing 2 and 3 companies a night, that average is looked at as 1.72, for instance, in the worst-case scenario. But realistically, that's because, as the chief was talking about, the heavy times are when people are on vacation. Those are when you have the most people out. It's not this time of year when no one's taking time off or the department is healthy. We're actually moving towards a younger department now, as opposed to when I first came on, it was much the other way. So it's very important when you look at these things that when we close multiple companies, how dangerous it can be. You know, back a couple of years ago, we had Bridge Street, where we had 3 companies out of service, all 3 of which would have responded to that fire. Now, again, we look at it, and I look at it as a multi-prong attack, because we have company closings that we're trying to combat, along with the manager and city council. We now have EpiPens and nasal Narcan on every truck. Well, again, to put it in the terms that I think everybody can understand, it's kind of like buying a brand-new tool and putting it in a toolbox that's not going on your truck. If you don't have it, if that company's out of service, that EpiPen does nobody any good. If that Narcan is on a closed truck, it does nobody any good. So it's great to have it, but we are the city of Lowell. We're a very busy, aggressive fire department, and it's important to note these things. It's extremely important. And again, I mentioned a multi-prong attack. That's because some of the trucks that we have are older than my kids. My kids are 23 and 20 and 16 years old, for anybody wondering how old they actually are. So it is important because, again, these trucks break down. You know, we go on an enormous number of calls per year. So it's important. And again, I know all these things are being worked on, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that these are important. It is very important that we replace these trucks, because when something goes wrong at a fire, and it happens with that ladder truck that's in front of a building, now basically what you have is a big paperweight in front of you if that ladder didn't rise. There's nothing you can do with it. So now you have to try and maneuver trucks in what's already a chaotic scene and get another piece of apparatus in to do the job. Or you're throwing ground ladders. Again, I'm just relating this to a ladder company work, but throwing ground ladders, it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 people to throw a ground ladder. Again, We get into manpower, we get into companies being in, deputy chiefs on scene, being able to call multiple alarms, getting people there. It's extremely important. Again, I've heard different discussions about perhaps a new station, new police and fire station, multiple stations, et cetera, and I think that'd be fantastic, but I'd much rather see bodies staffing them. It doesn't do us a lot of good to build a new station if we're gonna close a company that's there. And again, I look at it as the nasal Narcan issue, because I know I mentioned in previous conversations that I go to a number of them working in the downtown area. We just had one the other night, underneath the bridge. Now you're talking not about just walking into somebody's home and putting it together and giving them a dose of nasal Narcan. We had an issue where we had to actually get to the person, foot of John Street. Now you're talking extra time to get there. Again, if our company's not in service, that company's coming from farther away. That's why it's so important. So I'll end it with that and just say thank you for your time.
Quick question for you, Chief. You mentioned that the 201 total members you have now. Is that, lower than 5 years ago in your time as chief over there? Is that the average number, or is that a lower number than before?
That's what it's been for several years. I think it was in fiscal 9, we dipped to around 192 or 193 for a while. But it's been fairly steady at 201. And I mean, that's what we're funded for. We've been down 7 positions for a while. Actually, it was 10 after the first of the year. And it's just a slow process, hiring through civil service and all that. So, I mean, we're funded for 201. It's almost like very rarely are we at that full capacity, because by the time we hire, somebody else has retired. I mean, if you want to go back as far as, the early 1990s, we were at 248, 250, and we had 3 more stations. So, I mean, we're down from a number of years ago, but in the past, say, decade, I think the 201 has been a fairly steady number.
Do you know how many people you have on the reserve list currently?
On the reserve list, there's about 26 or so. We have 7 people starting next week, and then 1 3 weeks after that. By January, I'll have about another 4 openings, so we'll be looking to fill them. But that's always just playing catch-up, getting caught up to that 201 number.
So it's the 2 options, either increase your overtime or get bodies in stations?
Correct.
Great, thank you. Constable Ninja?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the chief, as Chairman Rourke mentioned, it is concerning to see that, 3 months into the fiscal, chief, or 25% into the fiscal, we're over 50% of the overtime budget, and it's alarming. So it's in one sense refreshing to hear July and August to summer vacations that attribute to a lot of this. So with that being said, where do you expect us to be on June 30th, or on or about at the end of the fiscal? With this, is this higher than normal? You know better than I. At this time of year, it seems very high to me, but you're the professional. Can you kind of brief us there, or where is this a troubling trend that's going to continue through the fiscal, or?
Well, it doesn't trouble me, and we have to take into consideration that the fire union, like most unions, just settled a 3-year contract that essentially increased the wages about 7%. So that has to be factored in compared to, like, say, fiscal 12 or fiscal 11. You really can't look at those. Frankly, I'm not alarmed by the numbers. If we're going to go in this direction, we're going to have to decide, are we going to have the coverage and spend the money, or are we not? This looks like a lot of money compared to what we have been spending. I know for a fact that towns like Tewksbury and Methuen and probably even Dracut spend what we spend, if not more, and they don't even have half the members that we have. It's just a fact that, I mean, if I knew a way around it, believe me, I'd be here talking about it. It's either a committal of the funds or extra bodies.
Okay, well.
So, I mean, but to answer your question, where will this be come next June 30th? I'm going to guess close to $1 million.
Okay.
Now, let me add to that, too, that in the early 80s, Lowell Fire was spending $1.5 million on overtime. To me, if now in 2014, we were still only spending $1.5 million, that would be quite a success story that we haven't spent any more in 30 years. But we had a period where we would go so far down. Since I've been chief, we had years we were starting the year with $375,000, $400,000 in overtime, compared to $1.5 million 30 years ago. You know, so in today's dollars, that $1.5 million would have to be $2 million anyway.
Yes, understood.
So I don't think the picture is terribly bleak. I think we've taken this whole thing so many steps back that, to me, we're getting to where we should have been, is how I'm looking at it.
Okay, Chief, well, what I know we have needs for new stations, trucks, staffing, overtime. I know that the needs are all there, but if you could, yourself and your department heads, prioritize to the best you can. I know they're all important, but I know I look at fire safety differently on the wake of the Branch Street tragedy, that your staff did a tremendous job, and I believe minimize casualties as humanly possible. And I know you don't think about fire safety until something like that happens to you, and you know what? It happened to us. So I know I look at things differently, and I'm sure my colleagues do well, but we can only do what we have to work with at the same time. So please keep us abreast as to your needs and priorities and what we can do to make sure every part of the city is safe on every corner. And because I do think that's very important. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I thank you for that compliment, and I agree with you. And while I don't really like to politicize those types of fires, I mean, it is a perfect example. Had the ladder company at Branch Street been the one out of service that night, I think that whole terrible outcome would have been even worse. And like I always said, if I had a crystal ball and knew which stations needed to be closed on a particular shift, it would be much easier, but I don't. So we were fortunate in that situation that the first responding companies were there, were available, did the right thing. So I agree with you, and I will certainly keep you and the manager and CFO abreast of how this is as we move along.
Thank you very much, Chief. And I don't believe for a second you're politicizing that horrible event whatsoever. Your department is top-notch and first class. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Marcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to request that Chief Pitter provide the manager with a weekly report on all the closings of the stations and the locations that it is. That is the motion.
Second.
As well as, I'd like to know, say that we closed one company. What is the cost to restore that one closing? One closing would be one company. So what would that cost be for that day, let's say?
It's approximately $1,500 per shift to keep the company that would be closed open. I mean, that would depend if we're hiring a lieutenant or a captain or a very junior firefighter, but a ballpark figure would be $1,500 per company per shift.
How many shifts are there then? 3?
There's 2 shifts each day.
Shifts
the day
each
shift, the night
day,
shift,
so
right,
we're talking about $3,000
per day,
per day times 7.
correct. And that's why this figure has gotten to where it is so quickly over the summer schedule.
Are you using you're using overtime? What would the balance be better, to have overtime and have the firefighters stay, or to spread it out and?
That would require certainly a deeper analysis than I did here. I mean, with hiring extra firefighters, then you have the insurance, pension costs, and all that goes with it. The overtime is just straight overtime. It's easy to do. I would guess that ideally some combination of extra firefighters and the overtime account. You could never not do the overtime account, because even if you added extra firefighters, those firefighters have time off that they have coming to them. they get injured, they get sick, they have their vacation time. So there's always going to be a need for an overtime account. I guess we'd have to really take a look at this and see what would be the optimum combination of overtime and extra firefighters to keep everybody open.
Thank you, Counselor.
My name is Anne Marie Page, and I believe I already registered. When the chief said there was the possibility of closing 3 houses, it sort of sent shivers up my spine. This is a scary thing I don't want to think about. And I think, as the chief said, the hand of God was there that night when that firehouse was left open, and if it wasn't, that tragedy would have been a lot worse. And that's not a decision I'd want to put on any man's shoulders. But now, years ago, firefighters fought fires, and the police sort of disciplined people here and there, and we all went on our happy way. We're not on our happy way anymore. Things are far more serious, far more complicated. Now our firefighters come at medical. If there's a 911 at my house, he shows up first. Then he shows up second, and then my ambulance shows up, right? There are some things we can cut, there's some things we can't touch. The 2 departments in front of you now keep us alive and kicking. We like that. We have to educate our children. We like that. And Mr. Murphy has a tough job because he's got a checkbook this big and he's got to stretch it to that big. But I don't want to even think of the thought of closing 3 houses. It's bad enough when we have to close 1, but 3 would be a very scary thought. Thank you very much. We appreciate what you do for us.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. Lieutenant?
I just like to briefly add, the chief and I do work together pretty closely as far as trying to come up with creative ways to keep companies open. But I do think, and this isn't something I've talked to the chief directly about, but again, something to possibly think about, and I think this is a forum to at least bring it up for discussion, is there is a ton of grant money out there that's available to public safety. And I'm not saying it's the save-all, end-all, but it very well might be possible that getting a grant writer specific to the fire department might be very helpful in finding these, because they're deep waters, they're treacherous waters to navigate. And I know from speaking to one of our members, and it was just one of our members who had written them in the past, if you just put one word down incorrectly, they take your application and they throw it away, basically, for all intents and purposes. So you don't get what you think you're going to get. You think you might have done a great job, but you've left something out. I think it's a piece of expertise that really might benefit us as far as somebody that's out there actively hunting for different grants. They might be energy grants. That might free up some money by being able to come up with money to heat the stations through some type of natural fuel grant or whatever. It just, if there's somebody there maybe dedicated to doing it, perhaps there's more money to free up. I know it's kept fire departments alive in particular anyway over the last couple of years when things have been bleak. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Lieutenant. I know the police department has a terrific grant writer there, so thank you for your idea, and you can expect that to be a motion for next Tuesday. So thank you very much. Council Belanger?
Yeah, just real quick, Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a great idea, Lieutenant. One I probably would not have thought of, and it's common sense, and it's a great idea, and one, as Council Rourke said, we're going to pursue. Let's explore all avenues to make this city as safe as possible. So well done on that idea. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, give a roll call on Council Mercer's motion, please. Council Rourke? Yes.
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 Chief, Lieutenant, thank you very much for your time. If that is it, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you very much all for attending.
Yeah.